Hello everyone, welcome to a remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video, I want to begin our discussion on change detection. So if you think up to everything we've done so far in this course, right, we've gone through a pixel, what its value meant, how we can look at the value of a pixel at multiple wavelengths to generate things like spectral response curves, and how we could use those spectral response curves with classification algorithms to identify what an individual pixel was. So we were able to look at an entire image in terms of how things are arranged in a single image. Right, we did that with visual interpretation. We did that with unsupervised classification. We finally did that with supervised classification. Right. So now we could stop there, and that certainly has a plethora of uses, right? Being able to figure out what's in a single image. But arguably, what's the most important role of remote sensing is this idea of change detection, which is basically looking at how an area changes over time. Right? And you can imagine that remote sensing is extremely useful for this because if we deal with issues with atmospheric correction and a lot of other errors that we aren't going to talk about, there are definitely errors in remote sensing. But if we're able to account for these errors, right, remote sensing provides consistent data. Right, if you think back to that idea of temporal resolution, right, with satellite sensors especially, right, we're getting information on a daily, weekly, monthly basis of the same area of the Earth's surface. Right, it's consistent. And it's also, again, if we correct for those errors, it's generally speaking unbiased. And what I mean by that is when we see a change in reflectance or a change in the way an image is laid out, right, that isn't our personal interpretation, right? That isn't somebody's memory or a narrative or a story or anything like that, right? It's a physical measurement that we can then relate back to this consistent data set, the archives that we've talked about, to figure out, well, how has an area changed over time? Okay. So this whole module is going to be focusing on talking about this idea of change detection and how we can use remote sensing imagery to figure out where and how areas have changed over time. So what I want to do is I want to talk about three major things in this module. The first is going to be talking about what is change. Put another way, there's different categories of change. Right, the different categories of change. The second thing I want to talk about in this module is how do we do change detection? How do we measure change? And then finally, I want to wrap up talking about when is change not change. And what I mean by when is change not change is basically the errors that can occur in change detection. When are we saying there's change, but in the real world, we actually don't have change? So hopefully that makes sense. Again, we're going to talk about what we mean when we say change, how are we categorizing it, how do we measure change, right? What are some of the specific sort of tools that we use? And then 3, dealing with error, when is change not change? So again, this is just kind of an overview of what to expect. Hopefully this all makes sense. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.